Imagine you're at work or school, it's lunchtime, and you notice there's a group talking about a controversial topic. Maybe homosexuality, or gender identity, or politics. You hope they don't notice you, but suddenly they turn, they ask, and what do you think? If you're like me, maybe you freeze, unsure what to say. It's not that we doubt what the Bible says. It's just that these are touchy subjects. Our work or schoolmates may struggle to understand our beliefs. They may think we're weird. They could even get offended. How can we handle situations like this? Let's see Jesus' example.
Yes, Jesus. He had a lot to say on the subject of homosexuality. He had so much to discuss about gender identity. Actually, I'm not so sure he did. I actually think, if memory serves, Jesus was silent on those issues in particular. So we've just been hearing from a chap called Dennis Caparelli. He works at the Warwick headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. He's delivering part of a symposium, Lessons from What Jesus Said, and his part is No Man Has Ascended into Heaven. And he's tackling this issue that Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly young Jehovah's Witnesses, will routinely run into, where they get challenged about their beliefs. It's going to happen all the time in school. And when you're asked the question, what do you think about homosexuality? I mean, he's describing it there as being problematic from the point of view of not necessarily what you believe, but how you express it in a way that's not going to upset or offend people. I would suggest that it's a little bit more complicated than that. A lot of the time, when you're asked about these things, it's not necessarily that you fully believe the organization's teachings about homosexuality. It's that you know you must believe them and you must repeat them whether you fully believe them or not. And because you don't fully believe them yourself, that makes it more difficult for you to try to persuade people. That's bottom line, I think, the problem that most Jehovah's Witnesses face when they are confronted with, quote-unquote, controversial topics such as homosexuality.
What can help us to talk about controversial topics like the ones we mentioned earlier, or about false beliefs like hell, Trinity, or evolution? Colossians 4:6. Let your words always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should answer each person. What's the first thing that can help? To be kind and tactful. Our words should be gracious, seasoned with salt. Have you ever eaten a meal that lacked salt? It's not very appetizing. Of course, a meal could have similar nutritional value with or without salt. But without salt, a person could take one bite and not want to keep eating. Similarly, if our words are not gracious, our listener may not want to keep listening to the Bible message. Now, I'm sure that you don't salt a steak the same way you salt a salad. Different meals require different amounts of salt. Likewise, different topics require different amounts of graciousness. And sensitive subjects require a lot of salt, a lot of kindness and tact.
He's really leaning into that salt metaphor, isn't he? So Dennis there, reminding Jehovah's Witnesses that when they encounter these controversial topics, what they need to do is be kind and gracious and tactful. I'm not sure that's always going to cut it, because bottom line, a lot of what Jehovah's Witnesses believe is actually misguided, to put it mildly, to season my words with salt. For example, Dennis has there described evolution by natural selection as a false teaching. And I want you to take note of this if you're watching this video as someone who's never been involved with Jehovah's Witnesses. You're just maybe curious about what their beliefs are or what they don't believe. Well, straight away we're learning that homosexuality is a controversial topic. So in other words, Jehovah's Witnesses do have a strong position on it. We're going to hear a little bit more about just how strongly they feel about homosexuality, and they are, just in these few words, dismissing the science of evolution as a false teaching. Now, I understand some of you who've perhaps grown up with fundamentalist views, not necessarily just Jehovah's Witnesses, but those of you who've been perhaps raised thinking that the Bible is God's inerrant word, and that humanity began in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. There are lots of people, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, who have problems with evolution, and they will say, yes, well, evolution's just a theory. I would just ask you to do a little bit of research on what the word theory means in a scientific context. And here's a spoiler, gravity is also a theory. We have the theory of gravity. No one questions whether gravity is a thing. And we have the theory of evolution. And when you actually take the time to dig into this subject and learn more about evolution and how it works and what the evidence that we have is for evolution, yes, there is evidence to support it. The more you look at what this guy Dennis is saying and realize that what he's essentially encouraging Jehovah's Witnesses to do is to manipulate people, is to put up a pretense of maybe agreeing with them, but then flip it at some point. He's encouraging Jehovah's Witnesses to be disingenuous. When he describes salt, when he describes salting your food, what he's really talking about is finding ways to persuade strangers that Jehovah's Witness beliefs are true by giving a pretense of being agreeable to what the other side might think.
So how can we add kindness and tact to our conversation? Here are some suggestions. Whenever possible, try to agree with the other person. Try to commend him sincerely. Before sharing the Bible's message, try to find common ground. Find something that you both agree on and build off that. Another way to be tactful is to avoid being argumentative. Arguing and attacking someone's belief would be like burning down a neighbour's house just because it's badly built. That neighbour would likely fight like crazy trying to defend his house and just see us as the enemy. Likewise, if we attack someone's belief, he's only likely to want to defend it even more, and he'll see us as the enemy. Instead, it's often better to simply show the person the beautiful truth. That would be like building a beautiful house across the street from that neighbour with a badly built house and inviting him to tour the new house. If he sees how nice it is, he may just want to move in. As an example, what did Nicola do? She didn't attack her classmates' view of homosexuality. She didn't say God thinks that homosexual acts are unnatural, even though that's true. She simply said, we don't support homosexuality, but that does not mean that we hate the people. And then she used the example of smoking. Yes, kindness and tact can go a long way to reaching our listener's heart.
So this is apparently how Jehovah's Witnesses are to persuade non-Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to such issues as homosexuality, which Dennis has just described, quote, as unnatural. That's the position that Jehovah's Witnesses take on homosexuality. It's unnatural. But what he's saying here is, don't use that word. Don't be upfront and honest about these issues. Don't be argumentative. Don't say anything that could be in any way inflammatory. Try to find common ground. Try to essentially trick the person you're speaking to into thinking that you both agree on whatever it is you're talking about, and then kind of subtly, sneakily introduce your arguments in a way that's as appealing and incremental as possible. I think that's just being disingenuous and sneaky and manipulative, personally. And I found it interesting, his metaphor about you don't burn down someone's house to demonstrate that it's poorly built. And then he says, wouldn't it be better to let your neighbor, whose house you were thinking about burning down, let your neighbor tour your house, and maybe he might just want to move in. I don't think Dennis has really thought through this metaphor. Because if the neighbor moves in, then where are you going to live? The neighbor then owns two houses, both your house, what used to be your house, and the house across the street. So, yeah, Dennis, marked down, I'm afraid. You get a solid W in your theocratic ministry school book, if you still had one, for illustrations. But yeah, just a really interesting talk that demonstrates how manipulative and sneaky Jehovah's Witnesses can be when they are trying to convince others to accept their frankly obnoxious, outdated beliefs.